understanding, had a mass of infection. We're going to call it a big ball of pus inside of her that was probably the size of a football. And she had no idea.
Oh,
but she knew she was ill, but she didn't know. She didn't care.
Right, that's the thing.
She couldn't tell anybody because she couldn't talk. She couldn't really,
she was like
talk.
in shock, kind of.
Yes. PTSD, terrible.
Right.
So
that's what I was trying to think of.
You know, I told her, I said, you have to go to the emergency room. She says, I'm not going to the emergency room. I said, no, you have to go to the emergency room. She says, I'm not going to the emergency room. And her husband's sitting there, and he just started to cry. He just started to cry. And I said, Scott, you are taking her to the emergency room, kicking and flipping, screaming if you have to. But she will die within the next few days to a week if you do not take her right now to the emergency room. And I don't know if they can save her. But she needs to get this infection out of her body immediately. Had I laid her on her stomach and pressed upon her spine, it would have ruptured through her entire abdomen, and she would have been dead within minutes. So, luckily, I had wonderful training. I had wonderful insight. And God was whispering in my ear the whole time, don't you touch her. Don't touch her until you know what you're dealing with. And so he took her in. He took her to the emergency room. You know, she really didn't put up much of a fight. She was in a stupor
and
anyway.
Weak, probably
she
horribly
was so
weak.
And she just didn't know. And they told her after the fact, after they took care of her and everything, they told her that they don't know how she survived as long as she did, that she should have been dead. And had it not been for her coming there at that exact moment, she would have been dead within a few days.
Wow.
And so I'm always quite aware of what's going on with my patients. Like, it's super important to me that I am extremely focused when I'm working. Because one little slip up, one little... I had a rough day today, so I'm not focused, and I'm just going to throw her on her stomach, and I'm going to just push this spine into place. Boom.
Right.
And I could have caused something dastardly.
Wow. So I imagine they put her on massive doses of antibiotics.
They had to drain her. They had to drain. She was draining for like a week and a half. Massive doses of antibiotics. She's wonderful now, by the way.
Oh, good.
I mean, we all have our problems, but I still keep in touch with her and her family. And her little girl's like
that would
12
be
years
reason
old.
enough to keep in touch to see how she turns out. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, because they live down towards Flint area, but they don't get up here much. But when they get up here, they certainly come to visit me. They come to visit me.
Good.
And they love me, and I love them.
You saved her life, really.
Well, and I believe God saved her life for sure. Through me, which was awesome to be a part of that. But she's wonderful, and she's got this beautiful 12-year-old daughter who's going to be a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon one day. I bet you.
Yes.
You know. And the husband, he's great. He got out of the military. He does a lot of cool stuff. He's a chef.
Aww.
You know, and she's just a really good lady. So
good.
I'm super glad that things worked out. But that's what I mean. Like, you just never know. You just have to... You have to really pay attention, and you have to love your patients. When they come through the door, you have to love them as if they're your own family, and you have to take care of them as if they're your own. But that kind of leads me to the topic I was going to discuss, but I didn't really want to discuss it because I kind of want to, but I'm afraid I'll get emotional about it. But I do want to discuss it. So, babies. Babies are wonderful. You've had a baby. You've had an addition to your family.
Yes, Avery Lynn.
And I saw on Facebook that you got to spend a whole overnight with Avery and have some bonding time. And how did that go for you?
It went really well. She, Christine was a little nervous.
Of course. That was their first time without her. Right.
Yes.
I remember.
And we were in Avery's room, and Avery has a nice, beautiful little room, but there's also a grandma bed in there.
Fun.
And so she has really, there's a bunch of things now for babies that we didn't have when our children were little. And she had this little sleeper thing that she slept in right next to me. And during the night, she got fussy, and I took her out and gave her a bottle and slept for a little while and put her back in there. And she slept all through the night except for that little fussy time.
Wow,
Yeah.
what a great situation.
Yep.
So, yeah, babies are awesome. I love babies, and babies love me. They really do. I don't think I've ever met a baby that didn't love me. But then they get to be about 16 months, and they absolutely hate me for
Really?
about 8 months. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but they get all freaked out. Like, it's mostly when I'm adjusting mom. Like, they don't care if I'm adjusting
right.
them so much.
Right.
They do, but they, that time frame between 16 months to 24 months, if I'm touching mom at all,
They don't like it.
oh, the stuff hits the fan.
They're possessive of mommies.
Yeah, they don't like it. And even if I look at them, they'll cry. And I've learned to just take that because I'm like, okay, they love me. They just don't know that they
Right.
love me right now. But
Right.
they're going to love me again eventually. So, babies. People always ask me, how do you adjust babies? Babies, they're so tiny and they're so fragile. How do you adjust them? Well, I definitely don't adjust them like I do an adult. You know, they're made of cartilage. They just got these little tiny, tiny, tiny little bones. And they're just bendable little bones. And you don't want to bend them because then you could, there's such a thing
Probably
as called
just
a...
with their fingers.
Yeah, but there's such a thing called a green stick fracture, and green stick fractures are cartilaginous bones that actually bend, and when they bend, they create a fracture, a type of fracture. It's not a break, but it's a bend in the bone, and then that has to heal, and it sometimes doesn't heal correctly, and it's just it's a real bugger. But I've never hurt a baby. I would never hurt a baby.
No.
I use the little instrument called the activator, and it's just a little tiny tap. Or sometimes I'll just use my finger, and it's just a little tiny adjustment. But that's all it takes. And people say, well, why would a baby need adjusted? Well, birth is a huge trauma.
Yeah, well, I can attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, squeezing a watermelon through a garden hose. I mean, there's bound to be some hiccups there, So babies come out in all kinds of directions and ways, and Lord have mercy, it's probably the C-section is the easiest on the baby, but the hardest on the mother. But
I don't know about that.
tell me, what do you mean?
Well, I just witnessed the birth of Avery.
Right.
And I was like holding a leg up.
So you're saying that was hard on mother.
Well, yes. And afterwards, Christine said to me, "What'd you think, Mom?" And I said, "You want to know the truth?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "I'm glad I had both mine C-section."
Really?
I don't know that I could have done it.
Well, I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. But what I'm saying is, like, recovery
Physically,
time,
right.
physically, yeah, for sure. It's harder on the female to, basically... Well, I had one of my C-sections at U of M, so it was a teaching hospital. So I got the benefit of being awake during it and listening to them teaching the other students what they were doing. So there's students, and they're all gathered around me, and, they got the surgeons in there, and they're like, now we're going to cut into the 13th layer of muscle. And I'm just going, no. Like, Patrick, tell him I don't want it. Tell him just leave him in there. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He'll come out eventually on his own. I guarantee you. Tell him no. Tell him I don't want it. He's like, too late.
Was his heart rate going up and down?
No. Well, the first one, the heart rate dropped. I was in there to be induced. I was 2 weeks over. He was stuck in my pelvis. Had been stuck there. He's the one that ended up, I think you remember me talking about it, with premature closure of the frontal suture. So he had to have surgery at 10 months of age. It was called craniosynostosis, and it was the frontal bone had been prematurely fused because he was stuck in my pelvis for so long. But, excuse me, they took him, and I was under general anesthesia for that one. So I had no idea what was going on for that one. But the second one I chose because I didn't want him to get stuck.
Right,
And I was
yeah.
really worried about that. I was like,
Right.
no, I'm not even mucking around with this one. I don't want him getting stuck. I don't want his heart rate going down. I don't want to have an emergency. Let's just schedule a C-section, get him out. He'll be happy. He'll be fine. Which, that was my personal choice. I don't know if I'd have done that today, knowing all the things I know now. But at the time, it was the best choice I could have made. And it was all it was all about making sure my baby was okay.
Right.
So Sean Gregory was born, and like I said, I was in the teaching hospital, so it took forever because I found out on the third C-section that C-sections actually only take about 25, 30 minutes.
But because they were teaching.
I was on that table for at least 2.5 hours.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, and they're like, now we'll be stitching up the 17th layer. No, I'm kidding.
And
there's
you
like
wanted to
13
yell,
layers of muscle. Yeah, I was like, stop it. Tell him to stop.
Get some glue.
Glue it. Put a little bubble gum in there. You'll be fine. No. So there's all these layers of muscle that crisscross before you get to the uterus. So they have to cut through all those.
And that's why it took so long to get better.
Yeah, those have to heal. And they never quite heal the same. And I've had 3 of them now, so they still never quite heal the same. Although I will say that the first C-section, I hate to say this, but I think they kind of screwed me up.
Oh.
Like, it took forever to heal. And I always joked about it and said, I think the guy left his gold watch in there because there was something totally wrong.
Oh, bummer.
Everything was off after that. But I was like, whatever. So I got my baby. He's happy. He's healthy. I'm good. But the first one took probably 4 to 6 months for me to really, really fully recuperate, where I could stand up and sit down without feeling pulling and tension and pain and all that. The second one only took about maybe 6 weeks, maybe 4 to 6 weeks to feel better from, like truly better. And then the third one, I was up and running in like a week.
Huh.
Like literally I was like, man, next time, I could schedule this in on a lunch break, but I wasn't having it anymore. But, so everybody's different and everybody's experience is different, but babies are such a blessing. But I did have the opportunity to hear them talk about it. So that's what I mean by it was easier. It's easier on the female to have it vaginally. It's easier on the baby to have a C-section because then they don't have to come through the birth canal.
And that's where they get messed up.
Well, yeah, generally speaking, that's when it happens. So if they come out in odd ways, their atlas, which is the very first vertebra, could be off-center, askew, could cause some issues. So we do check, and honestly, the most problems I find with newborns is digestive. It's like their little organs are just not ready.
That's why babies get colicky
stuff.
too, right?
They do, and actually what I was told colic was by my MD, my pediatrician, was that the baby's nervous system was growing so fast that it was painful.
Really?
Painful to them. Yeah, and that was my Shawnee. My middle son, Sean, was born. By 3 months old, he was standing. Yeah, I'm not kidding you. You could set him up on his feet and walk away, and he would stand there for about 30, 40 seconds, before he dropped to his bottom. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, I've never seen a 3-month-old. I have pictures of him at 3 months standing.
Wow.
He could roll over after, 3 days. Then he was standing. Then he was crawling around furniture, standing up and walking around furniture at, 5 months. And then by 6 months, he was free walking. And to tell a 6-month-old baby no.
Yeah, they don't know.
They don't know what that means. They just look at you like, okay. That
whatever.
Means yes. That means yes. That means yes. So you have to completely baby-proof, extreme baby-proof for a 6-month-old who can walk around. So, but he's always been like that. He's always been advanced. I remember taking him, but he had colic, and his nervous system just super on fire all the time. You just had to hold him so tight.
That's how Errol was, and swaddle him.
Love and just beat that diapered bottom, and that was the only thing that would just calm him down. Or massage. I would just take his little chubby legs, and I would just knead him like dough.
I love
and he
those
would just
little
go
legs and feet. Yeah.
Yeah, but he would start to drool. He'd be screaming, and you'd start rubbing him, and he'd just.
Aw.
He was so sweet. And but when I took him to daycare for the first time, I think he was about maybe 18 months old, and he shimmied right up the ladder to the monkey bars, and he freaked all the women out. I got a phone call that day. Do you know that your 18-month-old can do the monkey bars? And I'm like, that sounds about right. He's a monkey. But he literally had a ripped stomach, like from the get-go. He had this six-pack stomach, and he could like just pull himself
Huh.
up. He was just amazing. His body is amazing, and it still is. He's the one that he does all the skateboarding. He does all the tricks. He's